Hi, Dana. Welcome to the Sisterhood. The Sisterhood cleaning episode is what I'm calling this.
Thanks for having me on. This is really fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Dana, I feel like first time caller, long time listener. I have listened to your podcast, A Slob Comes Clean, in moments of inspiration where I've thought, I can do better. My family deserves better. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, your life, uh, maybe who you live with or what you do in a typical day, and your pseudonym as far as A Slob Comes Clean. Do you refer to yourself as a slob who comes clean, or that's just the name of your podcast?
Well, I mean, that's kind of the story behind it is that, so I'm Dana. I have a husband. I have 3 kids, 2 of whom are legally adults, I guess. So one's 18, one's 20, and then I have a daughter who's 16. So back in 2009, I started a blog that I thought was a practice blog. So I wanted to be a writer, and I kept putting off starting a blog, even though I'd figured out, oh, this is what people are doing who want to be writers. They're having blogs. And this was back in those early days. And I had put it off because my house was such a disaster. And my house had always been a disaster. This was not a new thing. But I was like, okay, I have been working so hard to get this under control. I cannot figure it out. I've got to do that before I throw myself into this thing, that I know will take my attention. And so I worked on my house, still could not figure it out, and was really frustrated about that. And it was the day before my kid, who's about to graduate from high school, which I'm assuming by the time this comes out, he will be like completely graduated. But anyway, he was about to go to kindergarten the next day. And I was only going to have one kid at home, and I was sitting in church and I was praying, and I was not listening to whoever was talking. But anyway, I was really frustrated because I was like, this is the time. Like, this is the time when I should start this blog. And I had so many ideas, things I wanted to write about. And I was angry because I was like, why, God, why have you not cured me of this messiness issue that I've had my whole life? Like, I had begged, please make me organized. And I was just like, why would you not take this away when it's keeping me from doing this thing that I knew he had placed in my heart to do? And God said, and I don't say that lightly. Okay. I don't say that often, but God was just like, write about that. And I was like, oh, that's actually a really good idea. So
thanks, God.
It's like that. You're so smart, and that, in that moment, the name of the blog came to me, A Slob Comes Clean. Now, I had never called myself a slob. I had many times said, it's not like I'm a slob. I'm just chronically organized, or, whatever, ongoing messy, or whatever. I had many times said that I wasn't. Well, that was a name that came to me. I couldn't think of any other name. And I was so desperate to go home and start immediately. So like all this research and stuff I'd done about the best way to start a blog, I threw that out the window because I thought this was a practice blog. I thought it was temporary. And so I made up a fake name at the time because I was like, I don't want anyone I know to ever find out that I am writing about this, because this was my deep, dark secret. And so I started writing about it. I thought it would take me a couple months. My house would be perfect finally. And then I would write about the things I actually, wanted to write about and felt qualified to write about. Well, here we are. That was 2009. It'll be 13 years in August that I've been doing this. So partly because I realized, oh, this is not a quick fix. This is actually an ongoing struggle that I have. My natural state is for my house to get out of control. And I have figured out and have to keep working on how to keep it under control, use these strategies that I've come up with. But mostly it was, God, he really had to pull me along. And it took me several years before I realized, oh, this is the thing. Like, this is the thing that you had for me to write about. Because, we kind of briefly mentioned it before we got started, but I mean, like, there are a lot of people like me out there. And I, at one time, I literally thought I was the only one that this stuff was this hard for. And, so there's a lot of people and, as far as like how it's morphed into things, like I never thought I would be the one to teach someone else this kind of stuff. I still feel a little bit funny about that because I always thought that, okay, well, people just want to know how to be perfect. Because when I started, that's what I wanted too. And I'm never going to be able to tell somebody how to have a perfect house. But I have realized that, okay, people need somebody to like kind of go back from where most organizing advice starts at. Like most of the time, most organizing advice is written by organized people, right? So, I mean, I would read that. Yeah. I mean, it makes sense that it would be, right? They're the ones who like to talk about this stuff. Well, I would read that stuff and I'd be like, I don't get it. Like this. And I would see their before pictures and I would think, yeah, I'd be happy if that was my after picture. I mean, like, and so I didn't, so I was like, okay, well, where I come in, which is not who I wanted to be. I didn't want to be the person talking about my deep, dark secret for the rest of my life, but I'm like, that's where I come in. I'm like, that's my role is I'm like, I can tell you how to go from completely overwhelmed, exasperated to, yeah, okay, this is what it takes. I can do this. Am I going to tell you how to have a color coordinated closet? No, but I've also come to a point where I'm like, yeah, that's not actually what I want. I just want my house to be functional. I just want to be able to do the things that I want to do and not have my house be holding me back,
Well, that's what I was thinking actually when you were talking is that when you were talking about, God kind of giving you this word and then you running with it and how you're like, well, that's not what I wanted to talk about. And like, that's really not the direction I was headed. And that's not that spiritual. That's about like cleaning. Right. And yet it's so spiritual because I know for me, when my house is in disorder, my mind and my heart are in disorder too, because I can't even like, it's almost as if you have this mental block that you can't get past because everything feels chaotic. And so it's hard to feel at peace and it's hard to feel like I can think and have like organized thoughts when everything's chaotic around me. And so it is very spiritual, actually.
It is in a weird way, but this is where I have to come in and say, I think this is one of those things that is different because part of my problem was that I was able to do all kinds of big stuff while my house was a disaster. Like that was actually
that's where maybe you and I are different.
Right. And I think that is actually what we're talking about. It's like for some people are like, I can't function if my house is out of control. And I'm like, my problem was that I could totally function while my house was out of control. And so, but then I would come to a point where everything had just exploded. And it was like, okay, I want to be the person who invites someone over, but I had to have 2 weeks notice to do that. So I could shovel everything in the master bedroom and then take a week to actually clean because I hadn't been able to clean because there was stuff everywhere, so it was like, this doesn't make sense. I don't want this. I don't. And I call it slob vision. Like I wouldn't see the mess happening. It would just like, I would see perfectly clean. And then I would see total disaster. And I was like, wait, how did this happen again? I didn't see what was happening. And so I think that that's part of it is it's like, it didn't drive me crazy until it was all like, okay, well now I can't do anything because it had gotten to that point, I don't know, but I do think that's one of those differences. It is. And most people who talk about it will talk about it from that perspective. And I was always like, yeah, but that's not really true, which is one of the reasons people were so surprised to find out that my house was a disaster because I was very competent in other areas, which was something that also was mind-boggling to me because I was like, I'm an intelligent person. Why is this so hard for me? Yeah.
Yeah. I'm so amening all over the place right now because I have felt very frustrated over the years that people who tend to give home organizing tips are organized. And it's like, you're not in my brain. If I could do that, I would, is what I often want to say. Like, if I could do that, I would, which is why I've appreciated your podcast. Cause I feel like you speak to me, you understand the struggle that is real and I can function. If you saw my desk right now, you would think I can't function with that desk like it is. I've written books on tops of piles of paper before. Yeah. So I have functioned, but it hasn't been optimal.
Right.
And it hasn't been what I've wanted. And I have learned as my kids have gotten older, it hasn't been how the rest of my family is wired necessarily.
That's a big one.
And so everybody in my house is happier when it's more organized, less chaotic, less stuff everywhere. And yet none of us seem to be able to get a handle on it. And so we're glad you're here. Let's talk some strategy.
Okay.
When you meet someone like me, what are the first few questions that you ask her?
Okay, well, that's a good question. So I mean, let's talk about what is it that's your goal? Like, what is it that you want to be able to do that you feel like you're not able to do because your house is in whatever state it is?
Find things.
Okay. Yeah, that's one of the number one things. And finding things then makes it easier to, leave the house when you want to leave the house and all that kind of stuff. Well, a lot of people will say things like, oh, well, all you have to do is put a hook by the back door. And then every single time that you come in, hang your keys on that. And I'm like, I mean, that's a great thought, but we've had hooks by the back door for like 20 years and everybody else in my family is able, like I have my kids, well, one kid and the husband always hang their keys in the exact same place. Another kid and me, I mean, I'm the one who hung the hooks and I'm like, it doesn't happen. So what are some ways to do that? Well, the number one thing as far as that I would say that you could start absolutely today would be saying a focused 5-minute pickup. There are a lot of people who are like, well, I can't go to bed if the house is in disarray. I can sleep like a baby. It's no problem. Like that's part of my problem is it doesn't occur to me even. It's not like I make this conscious decision that I'm going to ignore this and go to bed. Like I go to bed and it never occurs to me that I should have picked up first, So, so to say, I'm going to do this before I go to bed. Well, then I would be like, okay, I'm going to do this before I go to bed. I'm going to do this before I go to bed. And then the next morning I'd be like, oh, I didn't do it. Okay. Tonight, I'm going to do this before I go to bed. Oh, I forgot it. Okay. I'm going to set a timer this time. Well, I can ignore a timer like nobody's business,
Oh my gosh.
And so
it's like you're in my head. It's so weird.
So instead, what I said was, I am going to do a 5-minute pickup, literally the smallest amount of time I could justify. Okay. I'm going to do a 5-minute pickup in the moment when it occurs to me. So in the moment when I'm like, oh my goodness. Oh, okay. Set the timer for 5 minutes, pick things up and put them away. If I will do that every day or almost every day, then the keys that randomly get put down here go onto the hook. I mean, like, that's what I do in that 5 minutes is I go so that 5-minute pickup is incredibly powerful because it's something you can start immediately. And it is, and instead of setting it for a certain time of day, because then you're going to forget it and there's something about mentally saying that it needs to happen at a certain time means that when I forget it, I wait till the next day at that time. And then I forget it again. So like that just doesn't work for me. So instead I say in the moment when I think about it, I do the 5-minute pickup. The more I do 5-minute pickups, strangely, the more I remember to do 5-minute pickups. It's just kind of the way it happens. And so using that as an adjustment because the problem that happens is when I can't find my keys and I say, why can't I be different? That's what really goes through my mind in those moments is like, why am I the way that I am? Why can't I be different? I've got to change. And I'm like, but the way I've achieved change is actually by acknowledging how my brain actually works and using strategies that work with the way that my brain works. Where as long as I was just saying, so-and-so said, if I will just hang it on the hook by the back door, that this would never happen. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to do that tomorrow. Well, then tomorrow I forget. And then I'm mad again. And then tomorrow, and it doesn't get me anywhere where the 5-minute pickup gets me somewhere. Does it make sense?
It makes total sense. And what I was thinking when you said that is it's the difference between failure every morning when you wake up and are like, oh, dang, I forgot again, failed again, because I'm so bad at this, to no, my strategy is going to be, I think about it, I'm going to do it right now. And then there's success. And that empowers me or empowers somebody that's wired like us to say, I can do something. And this is the something I can do. And so it almost is kind of a negative reinforcement or a positive reinforcement because you are creating a non-system almost that is a system that works for you.
You know, as a life coach, you guys are speaking my language right here, because it's neuroscience is what it is. So when you are setting yourself up for those small wins in neuroscience, you know, that is basically you are setting up your brain to start creating grooves around that successful mindset that you can do the win. So I always tell clients, don't you set yourself up for big goals and fail, because then your brain starts to go in the opposite direction. Set yourself up for smaller wins. And like you said, it builds like a muscle because it gets easier and easier. So like what you said there about, you know, ironically, when you do more of that, it becomes easier to do. That makes total sense to me if I look at it through neuroscience, right? Because your brain is getting better and better at it, and it's getting easier and easier the more small wins you have. So it's so good. And I love that you're personalizing it, because, for example, like I don't think like the two of you. And so I need to do my system, but I have to know what that system is. And you have to do your system, and you have to know what works for you, because who cares if we have goals, if it won't work in my daily life? What does it matter if you know what I'm saying? Like,
yes, exactly.
It's no good if I set myself up for failure. So what is it that sets us up for a win? Okay, so let's talk about that. So Dana, we're going into fall. What is helping people get set up for wins, small wins, and how can they kind of personalize it to their own personality and style?
Well, you know, one of the things, Alex, that you mentioned was you can't find things, and that's a frustration. Okay. So the 5-minute pickup is something you can do right now. As you work toward this goal of having a house that's under control, a house that you can manage, a house that gives you the room and the space and the mental energy to be able to do the other things you want to do that have nothing to do with your house, you know, decluttering is the thing that is going to give you that gift. Like that's the gift that you're going to get. So I always assumed when I would look around my house, it was a total disaster. I was like, I've got to get organized. I have got to get organized. Well, I basically had a professional organizer in my mother, because she is a super organized person, and she would come to my house and she would organize things for me. And the first couple of times it was so fun, because it was like, oh my word, this looks so great. Mm-hmm. And then after probably the 15th or 16th time, when it had gone back to being a total disaster, I was like, it almost was more discouraging for her to even come, because I knew before she ever started, I was never going to be able to maintain it. Mm-hmm. And so I always thought the answer would be getting organized. When I started my blog in 2009, I was at such a rock bottom place. You know, I was like, I cannot believe I am writing about this, because I can't write about what I want to write about because my house is so bad. You know, so I was like doing that. I was like, I've called myself a slob. Like, there's nothing worse to call yourself. And I was just like, I am so far gone. I am just going to declutter. Like, I felt like I was failing by just decluttering. And the thing that I didn't realize was that decluttering was what I should have been doing all along. Like, decluttering and organizing are not the same thing. Totally. Organizing is problem solving. It is thinking ahead to the future, how things are going to function. There's a lot of sitting down and planning, or at least there can be a lot of sitting down and planning, or the purchasing of items, which is really fun. But decluttering is simply just getting stuff out of my house. So there was nothing to do first. It was just like, I'm just going to start getting stuff out. And as I got stuff out of my house, I could handle it. Like, I call that your clutter threshold. It's the point at which you personally can keep your home under control. It's the amount of stuff that you personally can handle. So it's different. The three of us all have our own clutter thresholds. Yeah. My mom has a very high clutter threshold. She collects and gathers for things she might need in the future, but she can keep it all under control. I inherited the belief that I needed to collect and gather, but I didn't inherit her clutter threshold. So I had to realize, oh, I can't handle this much stuff. I need to get it out. And as I got it out, then I was like, oh, I can do this. Like, I just hit a point one day where I was like, I can keep this under control. And if I just have less stuff, then I have all this time and freedom because I'm not spending my time looking for things all the time. So real quickly though, I just have to say that the way that I determine, because my issue was like, well, I don't know where things go. I didn't even have a place for things. I was like, I ask myself the question, where would I look for this first? That is its home. Like that is the home for something.
That's
because when I make that the home, this crazy thing happens. And when I look for it, it's in the first place where I look for it, which is like the goal of organizing, right?
Even if it's in the Ziploc drawer, you know what I'm saying? Like sometimes it doesn't make sense.
It does not matter if it's where I would look for it, because so many times when you're thinking organizing, you're thinking, well, where does my grandma keep hers? Because my grandma's house is like the ideal. And so where did she keep hers? But then you put it there and you're like, I got organized. Now I can't find anything. Well, that's not actually being organized, but that's the story that everybody tells, right?
I have literally said to myself, if I were me, like I'm a third person, if I were me, where would I have put this?
Yeah. Yeah. But if you ask yourself,
yeah. And there it was.
Where would I look for this first? It's amazing how that is generally the same answer every time. And some people are like, well, I don't know. And I'm like, well, you have an instinct. Like, even though you have no confidence it's going to be there, where's the first place that you would look? What's the first drawer you would open or cabinet that you would open to look for this item?
I'm really appreciating this conversation for the freedom I think it gives people. I think it really gives people the freedom to kind of do the organizational declutter piece the way that they can do it, and I really appreciate that tone. And I love the threshold, the decluttering threshold. I think that's a good point. Because why is it that some people, can have different varying degrees of stuff and be at comfort level with it. So here's what I'm thinking. Going into fall, time starts to get less than summer. So how do people do this? The decluttering, how does that happen? In what increments? And do you have a system that works for people?
Yeah, I have a system that is actually guaranteed if you will follow it. And the reason I can say that is that I was the person who had always failed. And so I had to come up with a guaranteed system for myself. And that's the one that I follow. So basically, it's a 5-step system. I won't go into all of it, but the basics are that I do not pull everything out of a space, because when you are limited on time, or when you don't know how much time you're going to have, you pull everything out of a space, you start working. First of all, you also get overwhelmed by that. Okay. It looks really great when you see the empty space, but then you turn around and see all the stuff you just took out of it. And it's like, okay, I'm done, or you think I'll just put these things back. And then you're like, well, I don't know what to do with all this other stuff, whatever. So that I never, ever, ever pull everything out of a space. Instead, I take out one item at a time and make a final decision about that item. And then I act on that decision. So like the first step is trash, because that gets me started no matter how overwhelmed I am. Like it's not a decision to make. It's literally just saying, is there any trash in here? I'm going to throw away that trash. And that gets me moving, and it helps me to start to see individual items instead of just a massive stuff that the whole thing is overwhelming. And it, little by little with everything that leaves, it's a little less visually overwhelming to me. And then I deal with anything easy, meaning it has an established home somewhere else in the house. It's just not there. I'm not going to beat myself up over why it's not there. I'm just going to take it there, like right now, and then with everything that leaves, it's a little bit less visually overwhelming, and I'm able to keep going, and I start to feel that progress. And then I give myself permission to just pull out anything that's an obvious donation. If I don't see anything that's an obvious donation, great. I move on to the next steps, which the actual decluttering steps. So once I've gotten all the easy stuff out of there that doesn't require any decisions, okay, because we're all emotionally exhausted right now. We all have decision fatigue. And it's like I can make real progress just with those first 3 steps that don't require any decisions. And that's the thing too, is when you don't know how much time you have, then as long as you're dealing with each item as it comes out, then you can think that you were going to work for 30 minutes, but if you get stopped after 7 minutes, space is better than it was before, right? Like you've decluttered, you're not done, but you have decluttered, you've gotten rid of some stuff. And so that doesn't require a set amount of time, because you make progress and only progress in any amount of time. So then you go on and you ask yourself, okay, these things that are left in here after I removed all that other stuff. So it's less overwhelming, but these things that are left, where would I look for this first? And then I take it there now. That's the key to not knowing how much time you're going to have. It's the key to only making progress. If you will do that, you will never put yourself in a worse situation than you were when you started. Okay. So I take it there now. If I can't answer the question, like if I don't have an answer to where would I look for this first, then I need to be honest when I ask myself my second decluttering question, which is, if I needed this item, would it ever occur to me that I already had one, which is a reality check, because the truth is I didn't have an answer for where I would look for it first. So even though I'm looking at it right now, so I technically, excuse me, I technically right now do know that I have it. I have to be honest and say, if I needed this, I would have bought another one because it would never have crossed my mind to even look for it. Well, then that would be double the stuff in my house. And so I have to let that stuff go. If I never would have gone looking for it, then I need to let it go. And so with each of those steps, you're pulling out, you're removing, you're making this, and everything that leaves a space makes that space more functional because there's room around it. You can see what's in there, you can get to it. And then the final step is embracing the realities of the space. So I call it the container concept. Like every space is a limit, every shelf, every closet, every drawer is a container. The container's purpose is not to put things in like I always thought it was. It's actually to serve as a limit, serve as a boundary. And when I see it that way, then I don't have to make value decisions about each and every item. Instead, I just say, okay, this is the space that I have. This is the stuff that's left in here is the stuff that I would look for first in this space. But there's more in here than will actually fit. So I need to remove my least favorites until I'm only left with what will fit functionally in this space. And so that process leads me through making final decisions about each and every item, which is again, that small win thing, right? Mm-hmm. Because you literally have had a win with every single item that you've touched has been a win.
Okay, I have a clarifying question about the item that you're asking. Would I even know that I had this? Mm-hmm. Would it even occur to me?
Would it ever occur to me that I already had one? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so you're saying to get rid of it if the answer is no? Because my thought is, well, now I know I have it.
Right.
So now I'm going to save it. And the next time I'm at the store, I'm not going to get one because I know I have one.
Well, but you didn't have an answer to that first question. Okay. So sometimes people will say, oh, well, I did know I had it. I just don't have a place where I would look for it first. I'm like, that can't be true. Like if you did know that you had it, there has to be a place where you would look first. So go back to that first question and say, okay, then if I am confident that yes, I would know that I had this, where is the first place where I would look for it? And then it needs to go there. Does that make sense? And so it's really just a way to make myself have a reality check. If I truly am like, I would never go looking for this. Yes, I do know that I have it now. And yet my goal is to have the space be decluttered, right? Which means I have to get rid of stuff. And that is a criteria that I give for me to get rid of stuff because I'm like, I need less in this space. Mm-hmm. And yes, I may have to replace it someday. That is a possibility. Almost never. Like, even though I'm confident I'll have to, I almost never have to. But even if I do, if I have to spend $5, $15, $25 to replace this item, I'm willing to spend that money for this space to be decluttered and functional and make my life easier between now and this hypothetical time in the future when I might need this item. Because problem is, once you declutter it, you will remember that you had it. But then I remind myself, yeah, but this space has been functional. My house is easier to live in. That's worth it to me.
Right. And I would guess that for some women, there's a lot tied into I'm willing to spend $5, $10, $15 in the future to replace this item rather than to keep it. That a lot about your past, about provision, about your scarcity mindset might all be wrapped in that one step that may not be so easy and clear of I'm just going to get rid of this because I didn't occur to me that I had it.
It's not easy, and yet it works. Like it work, and saying, okay, if somebody asked me, would I pay $10 for this space to be functional? Like, these are the things I have to process in my brain. And I go, if somebody asked me, would I pay $10 for this to be functional? Yeah, I would. Okay. Here's the other thing though. You are going to hit things that are just like, I can't do it. I can't do it. Skip it. Like, that's the beauty of this method, is we're counting as success anything leaving. So what you don't want to do is get to something that makes you stop and be like, I'm walking away. Okay. You can skip it, move to the next thing. And then this strange thing happens when you re-declutter, because re-decluttering is something that everyone has to do. I always thought there was going to be this end to decluttering. That's a delusion. It's never going to happen. But when you go back to that space, this thing that at one point, like 6 months ago, 2 years ago, you were like, I can't do it. I can't do it. And you just had to skip it. Now you go back and you're like, oh, and it looks completely different to me now. But you're better off if you will skip it and keep going than if you just stop. Here's the other thing too. So many times, that in that pile or in that drawer, you're gonna find some highly sentimental stuff that's going to bring about all these feelings of scarcity issues or whatever. And so you say, well, then I'm not going to deal with that right now because I know it's going to have stuff like that in there. Remember, trash, easy stuff, and duh are the things that bring up none of those feelings, none of those hard decisions. And you can make real progress, make this space better, more functional, not be done, but it can be better and more functional just by doing those things. So go ahead and get started and say, if I stop in the middle after I remove 3 easy things, I'm still going to have been successful. And that shift will take you so much farther, because for me, I always like, well, this is what's going to happen. This is how I'm going to feel. And so I'd rather not deal with that. So I'm just going to ignore it. Well, my house stayed a total disaster. But when I said, okay, if I get to something really hard, I'm going to skip that, but I'm going to do what I can, what isn't emotional, then my house actually started to change.
Yeah. The permission to skip, I think, is helpful for women who feel overwhelmed and who get stuck. And they're like, I get to this point and I get stuck and then I don't know what to do. I also appreciated don't take everything out, because for those of us who get overwhelmed, that's overwhelming. That is, well,
it feels like it would be more efficient, and it would if we lived in a perfect world, but we don't. Like, there are no guarantees of your time or your energy or your focus. And so even though it feels less efficient to take things there, it's ultimately in the long run so much more efficient, because when you're done with one item, you are done. Like, you never have to think about it again. It's not laying on the counter like, oh yeah, that's right, I got to finish that, I got to do that, whatever. It's just done. You never have to think about it again.
Well, and that is the freedom piece. Cause I mean, like for me, I actually do like pulling everything out, because that makes me able to organize the space. When everything's in there, I can't organize it. Again, it's the freedom, like do what works. If it doesn't work for you, don't do it. If it does, do it. Just find those increments of time and do whatever system works for you. So I would love us to dive a little bit into just cleaning and just how we can, and as we go into fall, create a manageable cleaning system that is going to at least keep the house feeling like we're somewhat on top of it.
So, for me, everything was just a disaster when I started. I started with the dishes and did not know that that was going to have the impact that it had. So part of my issue was always that, like maintenance tasks, I was always like, well, that doesn't really make any sense for me to focus on maintenance type things, because why would I want to maintain this? Like, this is a disaster. So that doesn't, like, doing little things. I was like, no, I need to set aside a weekend or a week or a month, clean it from top to bottom, and then I'll maintain. Like that just made logical sense to me. But in reality, I was like, I don't know what to do, but I know that other people, when I show up unexpectedly at their house, which I try not to do. But, when I show up unexpectedly somewhere, there are people whose kitchens are always perfectly fine. And I'm like, I don't know how they do it. I was like, I'm just going to start doing the dishes. And so I started doing the dishes every day. By doing them, I found a routine that worked for me. And that alone changed everything, because it was like, okay, then when I did have some energy, like, okay, I'm going to clean my house, I didn't first have to catch up in the kitchen like I always had done before, which would take me hours, and I would use up all that energy and never get to the rest of my house. So it's like, focus in on those really key things, the 2 key daily tasks that will change your home. If it's disastrous now, these will change your home. And if it's fine now, these are the things that will keep it going. And that is doing the dishes and doing a 5-minute pickup. Every day or almost every day, and so working on those are kind of your baseline of, instead of, if the whole house is a disaster, don't go like rent a power washer and power wash your front porch. Cause that's the kind of thing that I used to do.
So true.
Yeah. Instead, it's like, no, I'm going to do the dishes today and do them again tomorrow, because there's dishes math. Like, I thought that doing the dishes was this several hours task, because when I did the dishes, I had waited until every dish was dirty, and it took me 6 hours. So I was like, well, obviously these people doing them every day must be doing an hour's worth of dishes every day. And I don't have an hour every day to do the dishes. Are you kidding me? I'm busy, but in reality, if I do them every day, it's only 15 minutes. And I'm like, oh, I didn't know that. Like, I literally did not know that, but if I wait 2 days, it's not twice that. Instead, it's an hour, because I'm having to rearrange and finagle and move things. And then if I wait 3 days, then it's hours, so understanding that, and like, okay, if I will do these every day, it's such a small thing, but if I let it go longer, then it becomes, a much bigger task. So really focusing in on those daily things. If you don't know where to start with that. That would be the key, is those daily things, because then they just free you up to deal with the other things that come along. One of my daily tasks is checking the bathrooms for clutter, so that when it's time to clean the bathrooms, all I have to do is clean the bathrooms. Or before, I thought I was cleaning the bathrooms, but I was first having to deal with all this, clothes scattered all over the floor, and having to do this and having to do that before I ever got to spraying or mopping or anything like that,
Yeah, I totally agree. I agree. The dishes, even last night, I had 2 girls that wanted to go for a walk, and I said, let me just finish this. Let me just load the dishwasher, because I knew it'll take me 10 minutes and I will feel better when I walk back in the house after the walk. So those small wins, again, because I feel a lot of non-wins when I walk into spaces in my house. So where are the places where I can create wins? And often they're the high traffic areas. Those are the places that tend to get piles. Can you talk to us for a second about piles?
So I use my decluttering process on everything. Like, whether it's just the 5-minute pickup and I'm feeling a little bit like, I'm like, Dana, grab a trash bag, grab a, shopping bag, and start throwing away trash. And just doing that gives me something to start with. It gets me going. It starts me seeing what I'm really dealing with, instead of kind of this like, oh my goodness, it's so much, and then I'm like, easy stuff, Dana, what has an established home somewhere else? Take it there. Okay. So I'm going to do that. Anything that's easy, anything that I can do quickly. I don't have to think, ask questions, whatever. And, then if I pick something up in my 5-minute pickup, and I'm like, which would be how I would deal with a pile. When I pick something up in that, and I'm like, where would I look for it first? And then I go, and the thing about, piles and stuff like that. So the very best thing to bring your family in on from early on is, the 5-minute pickup, because if you have 5 people and you all do a 5-minute pickup, that's 25 minutes worth of picking up in your house. It's amazing. Now, it's not fun in the beginning. Like, they're all going to pretend like they don't know where anything goes, or they've never, ever, ever seen where you put the scissors. I mean, they've just never known that their whole, 17 years or whatever. But you're going to be directing in that. And over time, partly once they actually believe you when you say 5 minutes, because they used to think that, before I started all this back in 2008, I guess it would be, or whatever, my kids thought if we were cleaning up, grandma was coming over. Like, so if we were cleaning up, it was going to be this big dramatic thing. I was going to be in a horrible mood. So I had to like prove to them that I really did mean 5 minutes, like at the end of 5 minutes, we're going to be done. And so getting them in on that, well, what I will often do is be like, okay, we need a 5-minute pickup. And then I will put myself in this problem area or whatever, where it's like, okay, I need to tackle this thing. Let's be working on the whole house. And I'm going to take this 5 minutes to be working on this thing. That's probably sometimes a pile of stuff that only I can deal with, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good. Very good.
Well, as we close out today, this is all so helpful, and people are headed into fall, busy moms, busy people. What are some of your just like tried and true 3 bullet points? Here we go. You've already said a few, but do you have any other resources or tips that you want to share?
Do your dishes. I mean, like focus on the small things, focus on, you know, when you're overwhelmed, if you like think, okay, this fall, I am going to make that hard decision about baby clothes and baby toys and what I'm going to do. Instead, grab a trash bag, start walking around your house and throw away trash. If you don't know where to start in the most visible area in your home so that you're going to see the progress you're making and inspire yourself to continue, as opposed to, you know, defeating yourself by working in some obscure place and then being like, oh, I worked all day and my house doesn't look any better. You know?
Yeah.
Was that 3? I have no idea.
No,
sometimes I just ramble.
No, that's so great, Dana. Well, tell people about where they can get more resources if they want more of your tips.
Thanks. Yeah. So my newest book is Organizing for the Rest of Us. It's available wherever books are sold, of course. And I also have 2 other books, Decluttering at the Speed of Life and How to Manage Your Home Without Losing Your Mind. It took me a second. I had to remember.
So good.
Yeah.
Well, thank you and happy fall.
Thank you. You too.
Bye.